When clients become aware, maybe through a psychedelic experience or maybe because of some psychoeducation around early childhood adversity, traumas, situations of relational deprivation or neglect, how do we support people to confront that awareness?
Yeah. Well, so first of all, that takes me back to a citation by Almas that I use so often, and he says that only when compassion is present do people allow themselves to see the truth. But to turn that the other way, when there is compassion present, people have no problem facing the truth. So when you say, how do you help them to confront it? Well, first of all, through the compassion. And shame itself is a traumatic imprint. Mm-hmm. So you can pretty much assume that it's there. Now, it might be there disguised. So some people are not aware of their shame because they put on a grandiose cover over it, and then they become presidents of the United States, or they somewhat deflect it some other way, but it's always there. And behind a lot of the success that people have is actually shame. Mm-hmm. Is that if I'm not successful, then who am I? Mm-hmm. So they're just driven to be successful. Other people are just terribly ashamed of being. One of the saddest emails I got was after my book on addiction came out. Some man in Seattle read it. And the point I make in the book, of course, is that addiction is a response to childhood trauma. And he wrote to me, I read your book, a lot of great stuff in it, but I can't blame my mother. It's my own fault that I'm a shitty human being. So he didn't get it because I wasn't blaming the mother. Mm-hmm. I wasn't blaming anybody. But this man was so identified with his shame. To my regret, I never followed up with him. It was a letter. I'm not good at writing letters. I didn't have any email address for him. I wish I could have just talked to the guy. But the shame is going to be there in one way or another. People will be ashamed at taking up your time as a therapist. You're so busy. I'm sure there's people with many more serious problems than I have. Mm-hmm. Why am I even here? Or they might be ashamed because they're not presenting you with a big enough problem. I'm sure you have much bigger problems to deal with than my little issues.
Comparing mind.
Or they become ashamed that I'm so sorry to bring this huge problem to you, to burden you with this. Mm-hmm. So the shame is just going to find a way in the door. Mm-hmm. By any means whatsoever. It's always going to be there. Mm-hmm. And shame itself is one of the biggest impacts of trauma. Mm-hmm. So I think that needs to be understood, assumed, and anticipated mm-hmm. In any therapeutic interaction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, shame often wants to kind of shrink away or hide. Yeah. And as therapists, I've found that it's very helpful to begin to just to name it. Yeah. Oh, it's possible that there's some shame here, and what's showing up? Are you feeling like small and then as shame is named and brought into this space very spaciously without trying to get rid of it.
Make room for it, absolutely.
Just make room for it. Yeah. And the part about that.
And by the way, sorry to interrupt.
Okay.
But talk about embodiment. Mm-hmm. I mean, shame is specifically body response.
Absolutely.
It looks like this.
Yeah.
You just want to slump, your shoulders collapse, your eyes, your neck is bent, you can't look somebody in the eye. Shame is a body experience.
Absolutely.
It's one of the most corrosive body experiences to have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that definitely the survival physiology, particularly in Porges' conceptualization of that dorsal vagus, that collapse shutdown is often quite part of the physiology of shame. And absolutely. As therapists, there are particular ways to work with that are skillful. And always that, here in Numinus, our therapists will be would be learning about or already embodying in their practice, which is really good.
Yes.
I was going to say just about that person who wrote to you, and I don't want to blame my mother. It speaks to this element of I think a lot of people will come up against it in their healing, where there are some very valid, perhaps, primal emotions, whether they be rage or, that might come up against one's caregivers, or because there were wounds that happened. But then there's kind of a place where we can see beyond and see that, well, they were showing up in the way that they were held. And you can't, there is no origin. It's this transgenerational trauma, and then finding compassion.
Well, there's that wonderful book title by Mark Woolen, It Didn't Begin With You. It didn't begin with anybody. We can trace it back to Adam and Eve if we want. We can blame them, or then we can blame God for creating Adam and Eve, and So there's no blame, and that's really important, to remove blame. Now, as far as this man who wrote to me, when I think about it, what's really going for him is that he's very angry with his mother, but he's afraid to recognize it. And that's one of the deepest dynamics for people, is that there is anger when your needs aren't met. When you don't get your needs met, you're frustrated. That's anger. But as a child, to experience and embody that anger is to threaten the very relationship that you depend on.
For survival.
For survival. So then the anger turns against you. And that's shows up as shame.